What's up, guys? RGT85 here, and Death Stranding was obviously going to be one of the most divisive games of this generation. I wouldn't even say year, I would say generation. Everyone was kind of split on what this game was going to be about. Of course, it is the latest offering from Hideo Kojima. He has been freed from the shackles of Konami, and now he finally has a chance to make a game on his own. And everything we've seen leading up to this game has been very, very interesting. I've been all over the place with this game when it comes to the trailers and whatnot. At first, I was like, yes, this game looks cool. And then we saw more and it was like, what the hell is this? And then they sort of reeled me back in and I was excited again. It's been an emotional roller coaster when it comes to Death Stranding. And today, the review embargo for Death Stranding went up and it's pretty much ripped the internet in half. There are people just all over the place with this game. And I want to look at some of these reviews and try to find some middle ground on this and really see why this game is so divisive, why it's ripping the internet in half, why people are angry with journalists, happy with journalists. It's really just all over the place. And I feel like I can add something to this because unlike what a lot of people think, I didn't get my start in the video game industry just by doing YouTube. I've actually been writing reviews for websites since 2011. So I feel like I can add a bit of perspective when it comes to Death Stranding reviews and see sort of what these reviews are trying to say, see what these reviews are trying to push, and then kind of come to a general conclusion about fun in video games, because that's really what a lot of people are saying when it comes to Death Stranding. At what point in time do we start talking about fun in video games again? So looking at Death Stranding right now, it is on Metacritic with an 84, which is not a bad score at all. An 84 is a very, very good score. People are like, oh, this can't be game of the year with 84. I mean, it could be. Like, not every game is necessarily a 9 out of 10. When you have a website like Metacritic that takes into account so many different reviews, obviously people are going to have different opinions on games. So people will be giving scores of different varying natures. You know, no game ever gets a 10 out of 10 across the boards. There's always people who don't necessarily like a game. To me, when we're talking about reviews, you have to look at the context of the review. I don't feel like review scores are even necessary sometimes because a lot of people just tend to focus on the scores. When I make a video for a review of a game, I never score the game because I want you guys to be able to sort of interpret a score on your own based on what I say or based on what I would write back in the day. And I feel like if you can't convey a score without giving a score, if my words or anyone's words who is reviewing a game do not seem to give credit to what this game should be, if they can't give you the impressions of the game, then a score is just completely unnecessary. A score is worthless because it's not indicative of what was being written. So 84 based on 72 critics, and it's kind of all over the place. You see some hundreds here, you see some 95s, you see a 35. So we're going, oh, now it's up to 80. Now it's up to 80. So it's gone from 72 to 80. But I really just want to look at some of these scores and just kind of figure out why this game is being so, split when it comes to the internet. And then just talk about fun when it comes to video games, because really that's something that you have to take away from this is the word fun. So let's see what's going on here. This one to me was very interesting. We're seeing lots of hundreds here, which is essentially a great game, a top of the line game that we see. Death Stranding is like nothing I've ever played. Beautiful, heart racing, heartbreaking, frustrating, epic, stunning, and utterly nuts. I laughed, I cried, I cursed. I went to the toilet an awful lot. Death Stranding isn't just my game of the year. It's contender for game of the generation too. So that's a pretty bold statement, I feel. And I can sort of understand why. When you're talking about Kojima games, a lot of people get invested in the story. I was heavily invested in the Metal Gear series because I absolutely love those stories, whether you're talking about the original, the second game, the third game. Like, those games were so awesome in terms of storytelling, but there were people who didn't necessarily like the storytelling in those games. And that's something we're going to touch on here in just a minute about this game, because whether or not you liked the stories in Metal Gear Solid, because a lot of the stories in Metal Gear Solid can feel kind of convoluted, can feel like there's too many character arcs, they can feel like it's sort of all over the place. You always had something else to fall back on, and that was amazing gameplay. The Metal Gear series is absolutely fantastic. Looking at games like Metal Gear Solid 3, Metal Gear Solid 3 is one of my favorite games of all time. And even if you didn't like the story of that game, you still had that gameplay to fall back on, and that gameplay was just top-notch action stealth. You could go in guns blazing, you could go in stealthily. There were so many different things you could do within that game. But let's let's look at some of these reviews here. This one really stands out to me because I feel like it's sort of indicative of what is happening here. This is coming to us from PlayStation Lifestyle, and I'm not taking a knock at any of these websites. At the end of the day, it's just their opinions. You know, some people disagree with my reviews on stuff. That's great. You know, that's the beauty about reviews. It's everyone's opinion on a game, and you just sort of try to find some middle ground. So I encourage people to read several reviews or watch several reviews on a game as long as you watch mine first. Death Stranding is not a fun game, but it is an important and meaningful experience that earns its payoff through every bit of frustration and slog. It is a look at life and death, connection and solitude, a game about building up what matters most and supporting people selflessly. You'll be bored at times and outright frustrated at others, but it comes with great reward at the end that is made sweeter by the trials that precede it. It's brilliantly unique in its design and implementation of online elements. Now, there's a lot to digest with this review here. It's not a fun game. You'll be bored at times and outright frustrated at others. 9.5 out of 10 or 95 out of 100. I'm not sure how PlayStation Lifestyle judges their review scores. So at what point do we say that a game doesn't need to be fun but still can be compelling? Like, that's kind of why I brought up the Metal Gear Solid series, because once again, Hideo Kojima is known for his crazy over-the-top stories, and I'm sure Death Stranding has some crazy over-the-top narrative when it comes to how this game is, you know, presented and how it plays out. But you always had the fun of Metal Gear Solid games where you could have so much variety in terms of the gameplay, in terms of what you were doing. Stripping away that and just if Metal Gear Solid wasn't a fun game, would it still be revered as such a great series? I don't think it would be, because you wouldn't have all that fun gameplay to fall back on when it comes to what you're doing in this world. And it feels like a lot of people are saying that it's just not a fun game. Hideo Kojima has fully weaponized the walking simulator, writing a love letter to the delivery service of workers, our shipping and handling world. Death Stranding is about ending isolation, but it does it so gracefully that I can't imagine it being done any better than here. So according to Gaming Nexus, it is a package simulator. You're a package deliverer. Like, I don't know. Like, that doesn't sound like a fun game. And a lot of people are saying, well, maybe it's because it's Hideo Kojima and it's a new Hideo Kojima game. Let's be real. If anyone is put up on a pedestal, it has to be Hideo Kojima. Look at his connection with Jeff Keighley. I mean, that is just absolutely crazy. Jeff Keighley is actually in Death Stranding, the game. So he is held at a very high, you know, reverence. And I feel like that can also play a role in how some of these reviews are coming out, because people just hold him in such high regard. But at the same time, you still have to look at the game for what it is. You still have to look at the game for what it individually is. And if it's not a fun game, if it's not a good game, but it has a great story, you could say that. You could say the game has, you know, a great story, but it's not a fun game. But giving it, you know, a 9 or a 9.5 or a 10 out of 10 just seems absolutely crazy to me. But now I want to look at the other end of the spectrum. I want to look at the lower review scores for this. All right, so taking a look at some of the lower end of the spectrums, if Death Stranding wasn't so padded out, it could have been something special. Instead, we're left with a repetitive letdown that's far more enjoyable to watch than play. And this one right here from Os Gamers, which is a website I've never heard of. I actually really like this statement because it's something I have said for a very, very long time. And when it comes to Hideo Kojima, I cannot in good conscience recommend this game to all but the most rabid fans of Hideo Kojima's work. And even then, I feel like this game may cause some of them to balk and question their devotion. It pains me to say it, but Konami may have been a necessary evil for him, a check and balance against his crazier, more self-indulgent impulses. And there is something I have always said about Hideo Kojima leading up to Death Stranding, that I was worried about what he would do with full range and full control. I always equate this to the WWF Attitude Era with Vince McMahon and Vince Russo. Vince McMahon was the president of the company. Vince Russo was his head writer. And the two of them created some very compelling television that was breaking ratings, and it just brought the WWF into the mainstream. It really just sort of cascaded into this huge event, must-see television. But after a falling out, Vince Russo, the head writer, ended up going to the other promotion, WCW. And when he got there, he had that free range. He he didn't have a system of checks and balances with someone to be able to bounce things off of. He was able to do whatever he wanted. And with that, it just wasn't the same because you had these crazy over-the-top outlandish storylines that made no sense, that had no payoff. There was no one to say, hey, Mr. Russo, this isn't a good idea. I don't think we should do this. Maybe we should change it to this. And I always felt like there was a chance that Kojima would be the Vince Russo in this situation, and Konami was the Vince McMahon. Like, you have these ideas, you have these crazy ideas, and Konami was able to reel them in a bit, and that's what made the Metal Gear series so impressive, because it was over the top, it was zany, but there was tons of times when it absolutely made perfect sense. It didn't lead yourself up to interpretation with the story, and I feel like that's honestly what's happening with this situation. He's gone full Russo. He's got Judy Bagwell on a flagpole match, which was one of the wrestlers' mothers was put on a flagpole. Yes, I'm being dead serious. Like, that's how crazy Vince Russo was. A bloated, showy post-apocalyptic melodrama that makes a meal of some engrossing mechanics and themes. And IGN actually gave the game a 6.8 out of 10. There's a fascinating, fleshed out world of supernatural science fiction to enjoy in its sprawling, spectacular map. So it's a shame that it's all been saddled on a gameplay backbone that struggles to adequately support its weight over the course of the full journey. So it seems like some people are able to take this story and say the story outweighs the gameplay in this situation. The story is better than what the gameplay is presenting, and we love this game because of the story. And I think that's okay, but in the same time, if you're literally saying that a game is boring, if you're saying that the pacing is not good for this game, and there are times when we'll be bored out of your mind, is it really a great game? Is it really a 9.5 out of 10 or a 95 out of 100? At what point do we balance story and gameplay? I feel like a game that is fun but has a weak story is a better game than a game that has a great story but weak gameplay. And I look at a game like Friday the 13th, you know, that game is not a great game by any stretch of the imagination, but it's fun. You can have fun playing this game. And there are games that I have played recently that had a great story, but the gameplay was just not all that good, and that was like Call of Cthulhu. I thought Call of Cthulhu's story was absolutely fantastic. It was the driving force that made me want to finish playing that game, but at the same time, the gameplay was just not all that great. It was sort of all over the place, and I said that in my review. It's a great story, but the gameplay doesn't match that story. So you really have to decide what's more important to you. Is it fun in a game, or is it a story in a game? Are you wanting to watch a movie, or are you wanting to play a game? And I think it's just going to get, you know, even crazier as more reviews come out and people start getting their hands on this game. I'm still going to pick up Death Stranding because now I'm just super interested in this game. Like, is it really that boring? Is it really that slow and methodical? Does the story manage to outweigh the bad aspects of the game? But I just can't imagine this game getting all these high scores. One thing I want to leave you guys with is this. This is my final thoughts on this. If this was not a Hideo Kojima game, and it was just some random company releasing this game, do you think you would still see these scores? Do you still think you would see all these 10 out of 10s and 9.5 out of 10s and 9s out of 10s if this was not a Hideo Kojima game? I don't think you could say that. I don't think you could say that. But I just wanted to share my thoughts on this situation. I feel like I could give you guys some sort of insight onto it. Like I said, I'm still going to pick up the game, but it's definitely a very crazy situation. So let me know what you think of it in the comments section down below. And as always, guys, thank you for checking out this video. I'm currently working on a Luigi's Mansion video as well. I'm almost done with the game. Should be finishing up tonight, so be on the lookout for that tomorrow. And as always, I'll catch you guys on the next video. Later.